So we had
Yeah.
to like learn every song in 4 keys. And so,
Wow.
the challenges of splits and all that kind of stuff when it comes to that. I was playing 4 different keyboards with pedals.
Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm particularly excited to be here with you. I've just finished an amazing hour interview with Mr. Mo Pleasure. It's hard to come up with new ways to phrase this stuff because we do say it all the time, but the diversity of Mo's career, what he's experienced, is just amazing, and just a genuinely humble and lovely guy to boot. There is so much to unpick in this interview that I hope you'll love, from, starting out relatively young with the Ray Charles Orchestra to working with Janet Jackson, Michael Jackson, David Foster, and there's a lot more I'm not even mentioning there. I think you'll get a great deal of enjoyment out of this and also learn quite a bit to boot. So I'm going to shut up now and let you jump in and listen to Mo. Mo, sir, I can't thank you enough for joining us. It's so lovely to see you all the way from Wales. How are you?
I'm great, Dave. It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
No, pleasure is all ours, and no pun intended. So I thought we'd start off with a little bit of a traditional question, if you don't mind, Mo, and that's your musical upbringing. I know you started in music extremely young, and we're going to cover so much, but I just thought a bit of context. What started you in music and got you into your teenage years realizing that music was a thing for you?
It's always been a part of my life, David. When I was 4 years old, my parents got me into piano lessons, and they were teaching them at my church. So it was kind of like a lot of music students. My parents were educators. My dad was a school principal. My mom is a math teacher. And my dad also had this incredible voice. So he was a great singer and into music, but not in a professional way. So they got me into piano lessons classically at 4 years old. And that was the start of it. They actually brought me to the teacher, and the teacher was like, well, he's too young to start. And then they said, well, just try one lesson with him and see how it goes. And so I did the lesson, and he said, when he was talking to my parents afterwards, he said, okay, I'll take him as a student, because but you're going to have to make him practice and read the music, because he wasn't reading the music. He was just watching me and copying what I was doing, So that's when I kind of knew that I had an ear and all that. And then it's just all the way through school and high school, and have my own band since like 7th grade, and have my own bands of horn sections and all that. And I would write out the music for them, and, all the way through high school and all that. And then in college, I was playing in a lot of different types of bands, like rock and roll and fusion and, straight ahead jazz and all that kind of stuff, and country. So that was kind of I think when I started like learning a lot of different types of music, so
Yeah.
that's this bit.
And as we said in the introduction, you're an amazing multi-instrumentalist. So just, even if you can't remember back to 4, because I know I can't remember much I was doing at 4, but just, even a little bit after that, did you find the classical training tedious, or you actually did enjoy part of it, or a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. And then, the other thing was I was playing other instruments too. So I was playing the violin, trumpet, which I still play. So it was like, I wasn't a great student as far as like practicing every day, still. But, so it was a little bit like that. And my parents, I'll say again, are academics. So they were very much like, practice and do your homework, so all school stuff and all that. So a lot of it, I did enjoy classical music, and I love classical music now. And I still try to like take a stab at it every now and then. But the cool thing was, when I was 14, I saw Earth, Wind & Fire. My big sister took me to a concert, and had to get permission, and that's when I know was my defining moment of like, okay, this is music that I really love and really want to do. And I want to play the bass. I started playing the bass, 8th grade. And so I borrowed the school's bass from jazz band in the amplifier and bring it home. And even before then, I plug into our hi-fi stereo, and with the school's bass, and just play along with records and stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you left school, Mo, what was the bridge between that? Because I know one of your first big breaks was playing in Ray Charles's orchestra, which is one hell of a gig on its own. What was the bridge between, high school and getting to that stage? What was your life like?
Well, I went to University of Connecticut, and I was there for engineering. doing music on the side. My parents and a lot of especially black families then coming up in like the 70s and 80s and stuff that were told that engineering was a way to kind of have a job for the rest of your life and maybe progress up in a company and that kind of thing. So they didn't really see music as being that kind of vocation. So when I did my college degree, got my degree and everything, but I immediately went on the road with Ray Charles because I was actually at a concert with Ray Charles at our school, at Greenwich, Connecticut. Went backstage to kind of talk to the musicians and just kind of find out, how do you get a gig like this and all that. And little did I know, I ended up taking the musical director, Clifford Solomon, out for a beer at our local hangout. And he gave me an address to send a tape. And I sent it out to Los Angeles. I grew up in Connecticut. So I sent it out to the West Coast, not thinking that, anybody was going to do anything with it. And I got a call, went out for audition. And there's a little more to the story, but I ended up getting the gig after getting my degree.
Wow. And just, I apologize, this is my ignorance. Was that gig with Ray Charles, was that on bass or keyboard or?
Bass.
Yeah.
Yeah, bass. So my touring career started on bass, 1985.
And what was your recollection of those first gigs? And what sort of venues was Ray Charles playing with an orchestra? I'm assuming larger venues, but what's your recollections of those first bigger gigs?
Well, we did everything. We did everything from churches to stadiums to the Grand Ole Opry because Ray had country hits too. So and we were all over the world. Like I went to Europe 2-3 times within a year, Japan, Australia, we went everywhere. So, Brazil. So it was everything you could think of. And, back then I think We Are the World came out while I was there. Ray was on that too. So he was like, there's kind of a new popularity to Ray Charles. And it was mind blowing, cause to be traveling, and we brought the whole 28-piece, Ray Charles orchestra with us. So that was, and 5 singers, 5 Raylets, full big band. That was just incredible. I mean, like rival, say, bassy band or something like that. Just, so I was definitely at the time I was the youngest guy in the band, and they all took me under their wing and taught me the ways of the road and how to get around and stuff. And it's a good thing because it was a tough little gig for that. We were like 3 in a room sometimes, 4 in a room. We had to pay our own hotel rooms, and travel was tough. Even for a 20-year-old kid, it was tough. But it was great. I learned so much. I learned so much playing with him, especially how to follow anybody, follow any singers, follow any horn players, kind of thing. Because we had to literally watch his body movements in terms of tempo dynamics, all that kind of stuff.
So tell us a little bit more about that, Mo. So from 2 viewpoints, tell us about why you needed to follow. And I have no doubt that Ray was a bit of an improviser and liked going with the flow, but also, even though you're on bass, what you noticed about him as a piano player and performer that you picked up.
Yeah, and Ray still to this day is my probably biggest keyboard influence, Well, I picked up a lot of things. First of all, just, the basic feel of things, was really important. I didn't really have, even though I was doing it, I didn't realize that was an important thing. I always thought that like chops, virtuosity, that was like the goal, but I didn't realize that how far you could, when making music, how it felt was really as important as it was. So, that you call lagging the time stuff, like, playing with the time and pulling back on it and pushing ahead with it and all that. I think that was a big part of what I learned, especially even as a keyboard player, how much you affect the rhythm section. And he was amazing with it because, if you really soloed his tracks, as we say, of what he was singing and what he was playing, you can't believe it was the same person, just masterful the way he played with the big band and where he put the things in the spaces, where he took his time, played nothing sometimes, where he would slow down, once again, the body movements. He might do a song 2-3 different ways, 3 different tempos, especially Hayward, I'd say. We had no idea what was coming at us until he'd start. Sometimes he would do it like, double time almost. And sometimes he would lay way back on it, and we would just, we just learn how to follow him.
Yeah, that's amazing. And was he a guy that had a sort of would mix things up each night? Like what sort of song list did you have to learn for that tour? And were you constantly, needing to do new stuff, or it was fairly well set?
Some David had a book, but the book had about 500 charts,
Wow.
full big band charts. And, a lot of them hits, but a lot of them just like Quincy Jones charts and Steve Turry and, a lot of different great Sadetsky and all that kind of stuff. So he could pull up anything at any time. And he always kind of liked to test the band. We'd play a tune before he came out. So a band tune without him, and then they would introduce him. So, we would actually get a little strip of, I actually found one, recently, little strip of paper that had like the numbers of the charts on them. So it'd be like 108, 96. And of course they would have, Georgia, Hey What I Say and all that would be included. But the other charts, sometimes you may have never seen them, sight read them. So, as I'm sight reading this, up-tempo big band chart, I'm looking to my right and he's in the wings, listening to every note and ready to, find somebody if we play the wrong note. So, he did like to switch, especially that part up of the show. And he would change in the middle of the show. Sometimes he would just say, just go into something and, music director would be like 96, or whatever, this kind of thing. But, after we played with him for a while, we really knew.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, by the late 80s, Mo, you were then kicked off some work with Najee and ended up being their musical director as well. Tell us a little bit about how you transitioned from Ray to that, and again, what you learned with that potentially more senior role.
Well, Ray was a West Coast gig, so I thought my career was going to take off as a bass player in Los Angeles. In actuality, what happened was I did a full tour with Ray, 86, and something just told me that, there were other things waiting. So I'm from the East Coast. My friend who was with Ray Charles, Jeff Pevar, a great guitarist, had a gig in New York City, a steady gig down in the Village. So they needed a keyboardist, and he remembered me playing keyboards basically at soundcheck on Ray's stuff, on his Rhodes and piano stuff. So he asked me if I would do it. So now I ended up doing keyboard gigs on the East Coast in New York City. And what would happen would be like a lot of acts would come through New York City. And at night, of course, after their shows, they would come out and hang out in the Village. And sometimes you could get kind of picked up on a tour from playing there. And that's basically kind of the gist of what happened to me as far as being a keyboard player out of the New York area. But yeah, Najee, my good friend Ron Lawrence, rest in peace, who was actually from New Haven, where I'm from, I had ended up playing with him quite a bit. And when they needed a keyboardist, he brought me in, so Najee eventually made me music director, and we did a lot of writing songs, and we had a gold album back then, which was really something. That was a gold album that was smooth jazz, basically a new kind of a genre at that particular time. And that took me on, believe it or not, back to Los Angeles, because Najee ended up doing a tour with George Duke and Diane Reeves and 101 North and a couple other of the acts. And what they were doing on the West Coast was one band, several artists, one band, and they would call it the jazz. I forget what they call it, but they started doing a lot of those, and I got hired for those. That brought me into George Duke and brought me back into Los Angeles.
And as you can imagine, being a keyboard podcast, we can't let George Duke go by. So tell us about, George was obviously an icon and had his own style, to say the least. Tell us about George and what, again, you learned from him or what you observed about his performance and style.
Well, he certainly became a huge influence on me musically, of course, and just so much soul and so much feeling and so much giving and generosity, even in his playing. He was just a master. Actually, obviously one of the very best ever. But he was also that kind of person too, very giving. He actually took me kind of under his wing. I call him my musical dad because he's the one that introduced me to so many of the gigs that I kept on going and doing, including with Shel Pharrell, Earth, Wind and Fire, and on and on. And that led me on to other things. So without George Duke, I would not have had the career that I've had. But he was just a great, great man, very kind guy. Of course, he's a great singer too, very humble. Did not even think he was a great singer. And just gave me a lot of confidence, really believed in me, and was always there for me, hired me to do some even recording and stuff like that, and was offering me production things that he wasn't able to do.
Yeah, and so was that one of your earlier introductions to synthesize and stuff? Because obviously George was renowned for using a lot of really cool sounds and stuff like that. Was that one of your earlier exposure to that side of keyboard playing?
I would say sure at that level. I had already been playing with bands and using synths and all that and doing a little bit of programming and all that. But when I got to George, the Moog and all that, and just even the sounds that he had on the newer keyboards, he was very generous with that. He would often, I could use his sounds like for the samplers and all that kind of stuff. He was just very giving in that way. I pretty much copied him in terms of like if he was playing two Kurzweil PC-88s, I get two Kurzweil PC-88s. He actually would play two weighted keyboards. He had his station was movable, so he could push it around the stage and then of course the Dookie stick and being able to walk out in the audience with wireless MIDI, which was really new back then too. So I did learn a lot from him in that way and how to use those sounds, but and in a classical way as well. George is a great classical player, great. That Handel's Messiah, I'd really check that out if anybody's listening. But the way they like use the two, like how classical and funk work together and gospel and all that, really learned from George did.
Yeah, absolutely amazing artist. And let's move on to Earth, Wind and Fire, although just for the sake of our audience, this is an example of how diverse Mo's career's been. I'm skipping over people like Philip Bailey, Paddy Austin, John Lucian, but I'm going to jump to Earth, Wind and Fire at this stage. So how did that contact come about, particularly given you said your first big concert you went to was Earth, Wind and Fire and they blew your mind? How did that come about?
Well, I was living in LA, starving, and I came to LA because George said, hey man, you can work in LA. So I came out there and I was, I'd get the occasional gigs. I was working with Everett Hart a lot and, a few things here and there. And I was still doing my East Coast stuff. So, it was, I was staying alive basically. But one day I got a call saying that, Philip Bailey is working on a solo project and looking for people to write with him, and George Duke recommended you. So I was like, oh my God, Philip Bailey, I was a super fan. And he came out to my house. I'm trying to tell you, David, I was starstruck to the point where I could hardly speak, much less play anything. And he just saw something in me. I had this little demo tape that I had made. I just gave it to him, when he left, and I just hit it right that Earth, Wind and Fire was reforming. They had done some gigs with Philip and Breeding White, I think some jazz festival down in San Diego or something, and they saw the reaction of the audience just going nuts and stuff. So they said, hey, something, we could maybe kind of put this back together again, and they did. So that was 1993. They put out an album called Millennium. I just hit it right to where they needed a keyboard player. And George recommended me, and he had the tape that I'd given him. Philip did. Played it for Maurice. Maurice liked it. And I get this call, want to know if you want to come play with us on the Arsenio Hall show, which is a TV show. It's the first thing I did. Then we ended up going to Japan in 94. We did a couple other TV gigs. We went to Japan in 94. And after the 94 tour, that's when Maurice decided that he was gonna, Parkinson's got the best of him, and he wanted to do less gigging, less touring. So then Philip kind of took over as lead man, and he made me the music director of the band, and that's when it started.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do want to take a bit of a side trip using Earth, Wind and Fire as the example, but you've mentioned that you're a musical director now already with two artists and you've done a lot since, including one of your current gigs that we'll talk about. But what is your approach broadly as a musical director? I know it changes by artist and what they expect, but just tell us about what your approach is as a musical director.
Something, David, I try to get the right people in the room. That's half of it. That's 3/4 of it right there. You got the right people. And I don't just mean talented people. I'm talking about people that get along, people that are willing to, and everybody's different. Some people read music, some people don't read music. A lot of people learn this way, that way. It takes them longer. So it doesn't matter to me. I try to just get people that, to me, fit, and also can play their butts off. So that's, the There's no shortage of those kind of people. And then I just try to like, give them enough space to where they can do what they do and let the artists know that I've got their back. So kind of like say, I don't know, airplane pilot or something. Certainly nobody can get hurt, but to give them the confidence, give the artist confidence that like, no matter what happened, even on stage, that I could get them through it, but give the band the confidence that, they're able to be themselves, even though they're playing whatever type of style or type of music. Let's say there's somebody that doesn't read music or something. I find ways to like, let's take a break here, or maybe we do this one tomorrow. Okay, here's the tape of it. Listen to it, or it'd be great. So not to embarrass them. I'm always somebody that, I have to negotiate salaries sometimes. I'm always a pro musician, person. I have to deal with the managements as well. So, there's always that kind of, I'm that bridge between band and artist, band and management, artist and band, and, sometimes it's a thin line to walk, but, somehow I've been able to do it. And, I'm always praising people. I'm always giving them a pat on the back when they do something good. So I try to just stay positive.
Yeah. No, great perspective. And totally meaning this in an anonymous way, Mo. So not talking about Earth, Wind and Fire or any other artist, but have there been challenges for you as a musical director that you never thought you would have to face? So whether it's personnel or personalities or whatever, without mentioning any names, have you had some big challenges as an MD?
So many, because, I even tell people that I kind of train or, mentor. It's about psychology, even more than music, and sometimes you're a music director for, like, say, in the case of Earth, Wind and Fire, I'm a music director for a whole band. It's not just one person. And there's a lot of personalities, a lot of people, a lot of different needs and wants, and people want to, the thing about it is it's like, it's a weird balance of, being kind of the democratic thing, like, okay, what does everybody think, and then there's that time I have to just kind of lay down the law and say, here's what we're doing, even if I'm wrong, let's try this, so like, I think that I've been able to maneuver somehow through all the situations I've had, and they've been varied, the types of artists that I've worked with, the types of musicians I've worked with, and the styles of music I've worked with, and what those people want, what the artist wants, what the band needs, preparation before we actually even get in the room is very, very important. And now it's become a lot easier in the digital world, Back in the day, we had to send out tapes, cassette tapes to everybody. Now it's just, send MP3 charts, everything, So, I've watched it change a lot. I've watched that change the way rehearsals are run as well, because now you have less rehearsals, save money, you have less time to do it. Sometimes you have no time to do it, a lot of the way things are now, like you're expected to show up kind of knowing everything, quick rehearsal in the afternoon, boom, we're playing it that night.
Wow.
So, I don't think that's great, but I think that, I've adapted being able to do that if I have to in most situations.
Yeah, that's great. And just probably that leads to my last MD sort of question was, how do you like to run a rehearsal if you do have time, if you have a couple of days? What's your sort of approach to getting everyone on board and making sure you cover the material?
Well, first of all, if I do have the time, and sometimes I do, I think the most important thing is to get to know each other musically and get a band sound, whatever that is, get a good sound check, make sure everybody's hearing each other, make sure everybody's listening to each other, as we're playing. So I want everybody to be comfortable and not, not going, oh God, I didn't even hear the other guitar player, was playing all over them or whatever. I try to build it up from the bottom to where like everybody play as little as you can right now. You know what I mean? Let's just think about it as a classical piece. Your part goes like this. Yours does that. The dynamics change here. We want to build up to this here, and that's going to be the money note that the singer's going to sing, and this and that. And then, take it on up from there or come back down again. And I want everybody to watch me, and I want everybody to watch my body movements because I'm directing the whole time. I'm playing, so I'm not able to conduct, but unless I am able to conduct. But I want you to get used to me and what I do. get used to the drummer because sometimes he has to end the song. So, I'll be like, okay, this one, the drummer's going to end it. So everybody watch him and watch where he hits it. Just like with Ray Charles, basically the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's important to me as well. Already teaching them like my style and the way I move, what it means and what the hand signals are and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, great. And I mean, so you're only in your early 30s. You're musical director for Earth, Wind and Fire, and then by your early 40s, so only a matter of years later, you're touring with Janet Jackson, and that's obviously when she's at her absolute. She's still at her peak, doing stadiums and arenas. What was the contact there again? Who put you in touch with, the immortal Jackson family and got you and allowed you to do that gig?
There was somebody named, he's now a music director for The Voice. His name's Paul Merkovich. And
yes, I know Paul.
You know Paul. Yeah, Paul's great. Unbeknownst to me, Paul had seen me play with Earth, Wind and Fire. So there was, for Janet, it was an audition, but it was there were only a few people asked to audition, and I was one of them. So that's how that got started. And that was I learned a lot on that gig because, on Earth, Wind and Fire, we were really encouraged to play. I mean, it's still jazz, even September, all those songs have room in them for you to kind of be yourself, and I came in after, Vance Taylor was on before me, but Larry Dunn, it was just Charles Stepney, all those Billy Myers, all those keyboardists put their stamp on that music in a way that I never could. So I just kind of tried to be myself as much as I could. So I had a completely different style. And Sonny Emery, who was the drummer, with Earth, Wind and Fire, and I were best buddies and really connected. So we were always trying to take it different places. Janet Jackson, on the other hand, was the first dancer gig that I'd done where the dancer was the thing, And Earth, Wind and Fire, we had dancers, but they were, ornamental to what we were doing as music. This was like, we need to play that same sound every night. It's got to go just like that. All the levels of the keyboards and everything has to be the same every night because they're coming out of the side fills and the dancers are used to learning the same thing, the same show. So there was this consistency thing. And also that was kind of the advent of in-ear monitors. So that's the first time I had, used in-ears, which was a really different experience, having the band be like a straight line to where normally we wouldn't even be able to hear each other, but hearing every little bit of it and having it sound like you're listening to a CD. And excessive keyboard programming where every little sound was, and then troubleshooting on the fly, which was because those were the MIDI days. So I had my rack was under the stage, the mic tech, and I had a microphone that I could talk to the tech. So if there were any kind of problems or anything like that, I would be saying, okay, turn off the D550. It's sticking, don't turn it on until I tell you, boom, we end the song. Okay, turn it on now. I'd have to wait 20 seconds for the thing to fire back up again, push the sound again.
Wow. So and just on that, Mo, let's talk gear just for a sec. We're not a gear-focused podcast, but I'm going to take a slight step back to Earth, Wind and Fire. What were you playing keyboard-wise in that band?
Oh, so many things on different tours, David. I remember I had PC-88, Kurzweil, for I think the live album we did, I had a PC Kurzweil, PC-88. And then on top, I believe I had the... I want to say JV80 or something.
Oh, yeah.
The Roland JV80. I was playing a lot of Roland gear in a rack. I had D550s. I had the piano modular, MKX20. I had the MKX50, I think the 80, 70, just stuff like that. I had the Kurzweil sampler, 2000 in my rack. And then one other year I took out a Fender Rhodes. I took out my 88 key Rhodes. Which we had put through like some pedals. We had like tremolo pedal and, phasers and stuff like that. So, there was that. I'm trying to think of what else. Then of course I had, the wireless MIDI thing. So I had my own Dookie stick, that was painted with Earth, Wind and Fire symbols and stuff. Still have it. And, that was a Roland AX, was the X1?
Yep.
And for a while, at one point, I had the Yamaha smaller one too, the
Oh,
KX5,
yeah.
if you will.
Yep.
But I had wireless MIDI, which was it was getting affordable. I had the one from the guy, the Insonic guys,
Oh, yeah.
Aquila, and used two cellular phone antennas to run it. And sometimes it would stick, that kind of thing. But I had a panic button. Yeah, so that's what I remember the most.
Yeah. No, that's okay. That's brilliant. Thank you. And with Janet, obviously, that's a highly, as you said, a highly dance and pop driven act. Lots of different sounds. You had a rack. You mentioned the D550. I imagine there were a lot of sort of in sonic and samplers and stuff like that.
Yeah. We had of course we had that in Sonic because that's the classic orchestra hit sound that Jam and Lewis used, and we'd have two of everything. So in each rack, we had two racks. So like actually that's the first time my experience. If your rack goes down, roll in another one big, attachment, and then you're back up and running again. And we started out with two keyboard players, and then the one left, and I was covering it by myself. But when we had two, we had identical systems. So then so you could use either rack for either one, and it's just patches were in different places.
And was 2001, obviously tracks were used to some extent, not as much as they are nowadays. Would you have had to have synced in with click tracks and tracks as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That was a big part of it. And it was easy. It was really an easy thing for me to do because we had a great drummer, Brian Fraser Moore, who's now gone out to be the cat, and Ethan Farmer. And, the band was such that everyone was just so tight and so locked in there that we could follow anything, and literally what people don't realize is that when it's really good and when you have a great drummer, the click goes away. You don't really hear it anymore because the drummer has kind of buried it in their groove, and they know how to like make it breathe and pull back on this and then snap it in on the one and all this kind of stuff. And you're really just really so used to it at that point you forget that it's there.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, on that tour too, Mo, you weren't just playing keyboards, you were playing guitar and trumpet as well from memory. So I mean, it must have been hectic every show. You must have been working hard.
It was a lot of changes, and sometimes like the keyboards and trumpet, so I had to choreograph everything, but it's just like everything else when when you're playing keyboards, when you're playing, especially a lot of parts and all that, it's choreography is, it's okay. Now I hit the button. Now that'll be this. The split's going to be here for this. And then, make sure I don't go past that because that's an explosion or something. And then string parts to middle C and then up, this kind of thing. And so I had to do it also with the horn. So I'd be like, okay, I pick up the horn and I had a stand so I could grab the horn, maybe blow a few notes on it to warm up while I'm playing, orchestra hits or whatever. And then, kind of be ready to do that. But it was just choreography, Same thing with the guitar. I was just playing acoustic guitar on one of the tracks, just knowing that you got it coming up. So you'd be ready, boom, and on the blackout, and then you had techs to help you, which was a big help.
And I mean, obviously nowadays, most of us having that level of complexity will use iPads or computers to prompt us. Did you have stuff written down or was it you running on memory 100%?
100% memory by the time you're out there. But that, you rehearse for a month. So
yeah, true.
Later on, I was on gigs. I don't want to spoil the surprise or anything, but I was on some gigs where we had to play songs in different keys, and that would be Michael Jackson. So we had to learn every song in 4 keys. And so, the challenges of splits and all that kind of stuff when it comes to that. I was playing 4 different keyboards with pedals.
Wow.
And you just memorize it, and sometimes it wouldn't work to where that split wouldn't work anymore because you need a little bit more for the high strings that you're playing with your left hand. You'd have to change it if you played it in A flat. Now you have to play strings with your right hand and do the other thing with your left hand, so.
Well, while we're in the Jackson family, Mo, we might as well talk about that. So, even though I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but what was the role with Michael and what you learned? Because that's, as you know, another whole level again.
Yeah, well, that was I was second keyboards. Michael Bearden first keyboards. Michael just conducted the Oscars.
Yes, true.
you see somebody I've known since the 80s. We were both kind of playing these up and coming, artists. So I'm playing second keyboard. So I'm playing horns, strings, bells, whistles, organ, playing explosions, sound effects. Because a lot of the things on the Michael Jackson show, we just had to watch him because there's just no way to program that in when he's going to point and do an explosion or walk across the floor or open up his suitcase. So a lot of that was us watching him. And once again, splits and knowing which ones uh, which ones are which, and not messing that up, But I had to do that even with, I even played the Ringling Brothers Circus for a while. Yeah, I played the Circus and I played on bass. I played on keyboards and I had to, watch the clowns. They do a segment and somebody hit over the head with a piano. You had to have that sound and then the string, boing, 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 and all that kind of stuff. And, I literally, when I started on the gig subbing for somebody else, deafing for someone, and I had a clown in the orchestra pit with me telling me, okay, here comes the piano, crash, okay, now here's the,
I love that. That's probably the most unique
yeah,
musician-related story. That's amazing.
yeah, the circus is no joke. Circus is a long show that is in three rings at the same time, and moves like this, and has a million sound effects, and it's a live band playing everything.
I can't think of a better preparation for a Michael Jackson show just because of that diversity and
Yes.
how hectic it is. I imagine the rehearsals for something like Michael Jackson, like Janet, there would have been many weeks. I mean, as you know, the documentary or the This Is It shows you just how obsessed he was with perfection. So it must have been a challenging rehearsal process.
It was. Once again, the band was incredible. And there were so many of us sharing the work. But Sherry, who was playing percussion, Sherry Johnson, people don't even realize it, but he had foot pedals to play percussion sounds as well as what he was doing here. So sometimes you look like he was running or something while he was playing. He was actually hitting triggers with his feet. Sugarfoot had triggers for sounds in addition to his drums. And there was me and Mike and, two guitar players, four singers and all
Oh,
that.
wow.
We covered a lot of ground.
It's hard to mention someone as iconic as Michael, but I think Roberta Flack definitely fits that description. She obviously passed recently. Tell us about what your involvement was there as well. I mean, rest her soul.
Yeah, well, if as I've always said, if George Duke is my musical dad, Roberta is my musical mom. Although I should really say auntie or something because I said that on stage one time and she was like, oh, I said, oh, I mean, young auntie. So, I love Roberta. I love her very dearly as a person. I love her music. And that was a whole different kind of learning because, Roberta's musicality is so deep and so sensitive. Um, her touch on the piano is so beautiful and so classical. A lot of people don't realize that she's that deep a player and she can play classically and she's a teacher. So I grew up around teachers. So that kind of mentality and the way it comes into everything that she does, including how she talks to an audience, how she talks to us, what she's actually doing musically to teach us. And, she was just great at mixing styles. And she was just great at letting us be, you know, bring out everything that we had as far as our talent. She didn't hold us back. And she was a very giving person as well. Like when I mentioned, I called her my musical mom on stage. That's when she had come up to Connecticut for me and done a show for, my old high school.
Wow.
Things that I do in my high school for scholarship program for something called ABC. And she came all the way from New York, came up and did it, no charge and everything. And she's also my daughter Nadia's godmother.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, we're very close. That one hit me really hard.
I can imagine. Yeah.
I had spoken to her last time I spoken to her was maybe 2 months ago on FaceTime. She wasn't even able to speak, but I
Yeah.
played a song that I wrote for her. Um, and she listened and enjoyed it. But I'm about to release it, and she's singing it.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So
I
I
can't
haven't.
wait. Yeah. Well, let's actually talk briefly about that then, because on top of it, we are going to talk about a couple more artists, but tell us about your own amazing solo output, which has been consistent as well. So tell us what you've got coming up and also what you're most proud of from your previous releases.
Wow. Great questions. I have, yes, I have my only solo album that I've released. It's called Elements of Pleasure. And when I say released, it's not on Spotify. It's not on Apple Music. It's not, it was done in my garage in LA, and it was also done in hotel rooms and in my basement in Georgia. But it's got so many great musicians on it. And that was my learning album. I'd done an album before called Audio Caviar, with someone that kind of plucked me out of, it was done with Ralph Johnson from Earth, Wind& Fire, and he kind of plucked me out of the band and said, I want to do a project with you. And we ended up, connecting people in Copenhagen, Denmark, started the album over there and ended up finishing in LA. But, that album's got Jonathan Butler and, Howard Hewitt's on there, and just tons of other guests. Earth, Wind& Fire horns are on there. Earth, Wind& Fire is on there. Al McKay and, Ferdinand and Philip and all there were all on one track. We actually reunited, some members. But that was kind of when I learned, okay, I can do this myself. So I got a microphone, I got a preamp, got Digital Performer. Someone kind of taught me how to use it, some studio monitors, and I just started on my own, and did Elements of Pleasure. I just hit, that's about 2001, and I just hit it right where everybody was starting to do that. I had learned, on Audio Caviar. I gave it to this day. I think it's the earliest I've heard anybody ever doing this, what we now call wave sharing. I was in Copenhagen, and we sent a track to George Duke, and he played on it and sent it back to us. And that was a lot harder then because high-speed internet was just beginning, and there was no media to actually do that on. There was one PIRG that we found that would do it. And it took forever, just to send my blind wave file. But when I got to Elements of Pleasure, I found out that could be done a lot better. So I remember being in Japan, Janet Jackson, 2002, and I had, a keyboard and my speakers and stuff brought to my room every day. And I had a CD burner. I'd made, meetings with record labels in Japan that would come meet me in my hotel downstairs. There was also like a, Kinko's. You guys don't have Kinko's over here, but
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have my little artwork, go down there, print out a Kinko's, burn my CDs that I just been making upstairs in my room, come downstairs and have meetings with, Sony or wherever, and hand them my demo. So, I felt like I was like kind of on the cutting edge of doing things independently. And, I was going to the meetups in Cannes a lot and selling artists. I had partners in, France and Copenhagen and all that kind of stuff. So I was really busy kind of promoting American musicians all over the world, and, I felt like kind of a little bit of a pioneer in that regard, but now it's just done it.
No, it definitely was a cutting edge time though. And mate, so you mentioned you've got something coming up. So you mentioned the song that Roberta sang on. Is it an album or just like a single coming out, or what is it you've got coming up?
I do have another album coming up, and the thing is though, now the way it's going to be coming out is like possibly like Spotify, in terms of like streaming it and then selling it at my gigs, and then if I've got some people that are interested in releasing it in another type of way too. So I'm like kind of in this new world of how is music put out. I'm trying to kind of like figure it out, and I've got social media people that want to do certain things.
Right.
But I have a hard drive full of music that I've not released yet, and it's just like it's going to be coming out. Yeah, so I'm proud of that. My wife now is quite a singer. Her name's Kedma, and she's on a lot of the material as well. We're working on her stuff for her own album as well.
That's amazing. I look forward to that. And so just taking a quick step back, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mo, but I believe one of your current gigs is as Bette Midler's MD?
Yes. We haven't done anything in a while, but yes, I'm still, as far as I know, I'm still in the record.
And another absolutely iconic artist, what a voice and so on. So again, tell us your approach there. I mean, I assume you're playing piano or keyboards with Bette?
Yes, I'm a pianist, and we have an incredible band, like 15-piece band, 3 harlettes, female singers, 5-piece horn section, 2 keyboards, 2 guitar players, percussion, and all the very, very best at what they do, bass. Her show is great because it's eclectic, and I'm very proud of that show because I helped her put it together. I co-wrote some of the songs for the show. We picked the band together. We literally handpicked almost everybody in the band. She gave me that kind of power, which doesn't always happen. A lot of times, senior musical director, you're showing up and the band is already there, picked. So, we picked every person. We went through every song. We started with like 70 songs and brought it down to, slowly, got it down to an hour and a half show. What I love about her show is very eclectic because, we go through so many different styles. You got a Latin tune and you go funk tune, and the next thing is some vaudeville section where she's telling jokes. And we're doing, we're answering her jokes with little sound effects and all this kind of stuff. And then the next thing will be some beautiful, the overture for the Disney movie. And then the next thing, on and on and on, hit after hit after hit.
Yeah.
People just love her. So it was a really great show, and she treated us so well as a band, so.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I'm a big fan of that.
So I mentioned before that it's nearly impossible to cover the roster of people you worked with. I'm just going to throw 3 or 4 names at you, Mo, just for a shorter sort of couple of sentences on your view on that gig and what you got most out of it. So I thought I'd start. Mary J. Blige.
Well, Mary was a very short thing. I was subbing for David Foster.
Okay, I was going to ask you about David Foster, so feel free to merge into that after Mary too.
Oh God, we could do a whole interview just on David. But so he had produced her Christmas album, and I'd done some gigs with her on that. Just very professional. My experience with her was because some of the stuff was just her and I, and just very professional. Came and did the job. Very nice. I didn't really spend a lot of time with her.
No. And so David Foster, I mean, yes. Again, I've used the word icon too many times, but he definitely deserves the title. Tell us about that.
Well, that's another one. Another starstruck moment for me with meeting David Foster and getting to play with him was just amazing. He is a monster musician. And I will say this, out of all the artists that I've worked with him, through him, and there have been many, there have been Chaka Khan, Andre Bocelli, and Earth, Wind & Fire that he did for them, and what country artists, Peter Cetera, who I ended up touring with after that, Michael Bolton, on and on. They, no matter where they come from or what their musical style, when he says, here's what we're doing, everybody says, okay, David,
And is that, I'm really interested in that, Mo, because from just what I've read and talked to people, he's a demanding, in a good way. He's a very demanding musician of his fellow musicians. So is it partly that, and also just the fact that he's got huge credibility?
Yeah, it's literally, you nailed it. That's it. He is that monster, and he's a monster piano player. I mean, he's a monster arranger. It goes every style that he does. He's proven his production is just unbelievable. Our band, for the most part, was J.R. Robinson, Nathan East, and,
Wow.
Dean Parks and Tyler Caccone. Literally guys that I grew up listening to their stuff. So, even though he was demanding, he would get it. And he didn't really have to say much, because we wanted to rise to the level of being great. Bo Cooper, who's a great keyboardist, and does his arrangements and all that. So it was, I just felt like I was in the land of the highest when I was there, and learned a lot from him. And he's actually a very, very nice guy. Although he does get that stigma of being like tough. Yeah. He is tough. There's a few times that I've gotten, a little bit beaten up by him. I got dusted off, got back up on the horse.
That's right.
And, you know, we still regard each other. We have a mutual regard for each other.
Yeah. Which is amazing. The last one I'll throw at you, Mo, is you mentioned Chaka Khan, and she's about to come out to Australia on a tour. So, I mean, she's one of those amazing artists who's been at it, 50 years now. Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, in addition to being like one of my favorite singers of all time, it's funny. When I met Chaka, I was playing with Rochelle Farrell, who's an incredible artist. And she was just in the audience and came up and sat in with us, and she didn't know the songs. So she was just riffing, doing her thing. And this particular song had a keyboard solo and like a Moog solo in the middle. And here I am playing the solo, and I got Chaka Khan kind of back and forth with me in this thing. And I'm telling you, on the inside, it felt like, wow, she just excites you in a way that makes you play differently, So that, and since then, I've done, quite a few tours with her, especially David,
Yeah.
And, she's lovely. I mean, one thing I love about Chaka is like everything sounds like it's the first time she's sung it. It's that freshness to it. Joe Sample, people like that to me sound like you can't wait to hear what's next because they're not gonna do the same thing every time.
That's right.
And so that was refreshing. And she and David did a bunch of stuff together. That was through the following and all that. Yeah, great stuff.
No, amazing. Thank you. And we've got a few, what we call our regular questions, Mo. So I'm fascinated, given how many artists you've played with, has there been a moment on stage where things have gone spectacularly wrong that you can laugh about now?
Yeah, there's something I can cry about now too. Yeah, there's been a ton. Well, we were talking about Janet Jackson and the keyboard programming aspect of it. There was this one module. It was like 3 rack spaces. Cannot think of the name of it. It was fat. It was an analog module for like, rhythm bass and all this kind of stuff. But every now and then it would stick at rehearsals. And, I told Tech and I told the man, the music director and stuff, hey, I don't really feel safe with this thing. It's happened like 3 times now. Can we replace it with something else? But I think it was a situation where we were endorsed by them or something.
Yeah. So
I'm on stage, and there's this one part in the Janet Jackson tune where it's nothing but the keyboard, and everybody's out, And I play the chord or the note or whatever it is, and it goes, it sticks. To the point where like all the dancers are kind of looking back, like, what's going on? I'm the only keyboard player, so. If you got 2 keyboard players, you can look at the other one and go like, hey man, what are you doing? But yeah, no, that's, there's a million things I could point to. And, I still play classically. So, I mean, I've done Rhapsody in Blues several times with orchestras, and that's a real test right there.
Yeah.
There's times I got lost, had to find my way back, in the middle of a concerto, which is a whole other thing, and on and on. I've been yelled at on stage by Ray Charles,
Oh, wow.
Where he stopped the band, yelled at me and started up again. But that was kind of that was a little bit of a rite of passage that happened to just about every bass player.
Yes. And you obviously survived that, Mo. That's amazing. And I feel a bit silly asking this because you've already mentioned so many great players, but we ask our guests to tag a keyboard player. So is there another keyboard player out there that you'd be interested in hearing more about their life story?
Oh, that's a great, great question. Yeah. Well,
I mean, it goes without saying, Mo, I would give a limb to talk to David Foster, but I'm not sure that'll ever happen. But, anyone you can think of is always appreciated.
Yeah. So many, and I have talked to quite a few of them. Like when I mentioned the Joe Samples and Phil Gaines and all those guys. But there's a lot of new guys now that I'm kind of like, I would love to pick their brain, This guy, Jesus Molina, is that his name?
Oh, yes. He's amazing.
Kind of defies gravity to me. I just don't really understand. There's a lot of them, that I'll unfortunately never be able to play like. But also Corey, love to talk to him.
Corey would be a dream. Corey. Yeah, Corey would be a dream. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious where a lot of them come from in terms of, church, there's always that element in it. And bass players too, and some of them I played with, like Mono Neon I played with, and every time it just messes me up because, I just don't understand where it's coming from. You know,
That's
I love that
amazing.
compliment.
No, some great picks there, Mo. Thank you. They're superb. And then the dreaded Desert Island Discs question. So 5 albums. If you have to narrow your picks down to 5, what would they be?
Well, it has to be Gratitude by Earth, Wind & Fire. We have to be in there. I'd have to have Songs in the Key of Life.
Yeah.
Keith Jarrett live in Japan.
Yeah.
I think it's just a great one. Maybe George Duke, Brazilian Love Affair. And a 5th one, one of those Funkadelic albums or something, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I think I'd have to have the Barbara Adagio for strings with me somewhere. It's not an album, but I would have to have that piece. Samuel Barbara Adagio.
Love it. No, thank you. That's one of the most efficient picks ever. And you just mentioned Stevie. I think you did have at least a brief interaction with Stevie. You've done something there. Tell us about that. We can't let Stevie go by either.
Oh, God. Another huge influence on me, you know. Now I played with him a few times. I played with him maybe 3-4 times. And it's always been like, you know, I wasn't expecting it to happen. It just kind of came up. And one time I'll never forget was Stevie and George Duke.
Wow.
I was playing with George, at a, I think it was ASCAP, awards or whatever it was. And, so I'm here. George is kind of in front of me there. And then there was a piano behind me and, they introduced Stevie. So Stevie was at the piano and I was in what we call the rocking chair between the two of them, right? You know, so, they were talking to each other, you know, yeah, George, go ahead, you know, this kind of thing. And I'm in the middle just going, woo, freeze this moment in time, you know. But yeah, Stevie, we played the White House.
Oh, wow.
I was doing a Motown tribute under the Obamas and, Phil Gaines was the director.
Yeah. Wow.
So I had him and then Stevie came up. And Stevie will show up anywhere. So there's a million gigs that I played where he just came to the audience. You know, if you're playing the Blue Note in New York, you just pop in, you know, Catalina's in LA. She's seen me play different instruments with different artists. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Love it. We're going to wrap up, Mo, with what we call our quick fire 10. So 10 quick questions with short and sharp answers.
Okay.
As best you can recall, the first album that you ever heard.
The first album, I got Jim Croce's album and same also Santana's album that had Everybody's Everything on it. I can't think of the name of the album.
Yeah, no, gotcha. No, good picks. Your most important pre-gig ritual. So what do you need to do to feel settled before you play a gig?
Depends on the gig, but stretching is important, you know. And also just kind of like going through every song in my head and maybe even looking at the music before I get out there.
Yeah, great. If you hadn't been a musician, what do you think your career choice would have been? Would you have ended up being an engineer?
I think probably more, I got into business more. Like I would like maybe marketing. Wish I had gotten a marketing degree. I really love that aspect of business.
Yeah. No, great one. Favorite tour you've ever done, if that's possible?
Well, certainly the Earth, Wind & Fire ones and the Bette Midler tour was just amazing too.
Yeah, great. Favorite gig you've ever done?
Favorite gig? Whoa. When I'll pick this one. When I did Rhapsody in Blue, when my father was alive, and he came and got to see his dream of me playing on orchestra.
That's amazing. Yeah, love it. Favorite city you've played?
I'll just pick off the top of my head Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah. Name a song that you used to love, but you've now played it to death, so probably don't enjoy it as much anymore.
Wow. These are great questions. Tough one. You know, I like, if I didn't like it at the beginning, I still don't like it. And if I had to play it every night, like I love all the Earth, Wind & Fire songs. So even though I played them a million times, I still love them.
I've got to ask, Mo, do you love Wind Beneath My Wings? I actually don't mind it. I think it cops an unfair rap.
You know, there's a good choice right there. But, you know, I still have to play it all the time too, because my wife sings it, you know, and I still love it because, you know, there's some little turns in it that are kind of cool. And the little substitute chord, you can go gospel with it. So.
A favorite music documentary or movie?
You know one that just popped in my head was, I really love that one about Bill Withers.
Oh, yeah.
Bill Withers, and I also love the one about Paul Williams.
Name one thing you'd like to see invented that would make your life as a keyboard player easier.
AI programming, so I could just say, make this sound.
That's right. Hopefully that's coming. I reckon give it another 5 years. I reckon it'll be there.
Let's go.
And then your last but not least, your favorite non-musical activity or hobby. What keeps you sane outside of music?
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know if it keeps me sane. I love golf. I don't get to play it very often, but I'd say golf and yoga.
Well, just using a golf analogy, I'd say it's fair to say, Mo, you've hit a lot of holes in one in your career so far, and I think you've got a lot of holes in one still to go. I can't thank you enough for spending the time. It's been an absolute honour, and we always say we've only scratched the surface, and it's definitely the case with your good self as well, so you can't thank you enough.
It's been an honor to be here, David. Thank you so much for having me.
And there we have it. I hope you enjoyed that as much as you could tell I enjoyed talking to Mo. What a guy. He's only, in his early 60s. He's got a long way to go, and he's just about done it all already. I'm obviously envious to some extent. And no, huge thanks to Mo for his time. He's incredibly generous. We had a lovely chat after the show as well. Yeah, just amazing. So much to learn there. I'd like to thank you, as always, for listening, and also our gold and silver supporters, Mr. Derry Evans from the lovely land of Wales. And just as an aside, Mo was coming to us from Wales. So, Derry, there you go. There was someone just down the road from you. The amazing Mike Wilcox from Midnight Mastering, one of our favourite supporters and also a great mixer and master and audio engineer extraordinaire. Do check out midnightmastering.com. Speaking of favourites, the lovely Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew. Thank you as always, Tammy, for your ongoing support. And last but definitely not least, the wonderful team at the musicplayer.com forums, the Keyboard Corner in particular. What a great place to hang and talk everything keyboards. Highly recommended. So again, thank you all for listening. We'll be back again in a week or two. And until then, keep on playing.